I'm Sam, and today I'll be presenting my work with Díaz, exploring how people try to understand and be understood when communicating using machine translation. So often people are using machine translation to communicate in a language that they don't know. One of the challenges then is that it can be impossible to know whether a translation is correct. For example, say I arrived in South Korea and I wanted to order some eggs to make my favorite breakfast. I don't speak Korean, so how am I supposed to know if the person I show this to will understand what I want, or if I'll end up with 1,000 eggs on my doorstep, like the Norwegian Winter Olympics team did in 2018? While translation errors like this can be inconvenient, or even maybe a little entertaining, this problem can have a lot more dire consequences, especially as machine translation is becoming increasingly widespread and available for use in very high stakes contexts and contexts characterized by a power dynamic. For instance, in this example, where a Palestinian man was arrested after his post saying good morning to his Facebook friends was mistranslated and misinterpreted by Israeli police. Our goal in this work was to understand how users can identify translation errors, if they can at all, and when they do identify errors, how they recover. Specifically, we studied this in the context of machine translation-mediated chat. To do this, we brought together 19 pairs of participants across 5 languages, English, Spanish, Farsi, Igbo, and Tagalog, and had them role-play one of 3 high-stakes housing and employment scenarios. In each pair, at least one participant spoke both of the languages. So after the conversation, we showed them both sides of the transcript so that they could see whether there were any errors in translation that they weren't able to pick up during the chat, when they could only see messages in one language. So what did we find from doing this? Well, we found that that was in fact the case. People had major challenges identifying translation errors during the chat. Often this was because they relied really heavily on fluency, both fluency of individual translations as well as the overall flow of dialogue. But fluency can be really misleading because a translation can be very fluent without actually adequately conveying the meaning of the source message. In the study, we saw examples where people completely misunderstood each other and didn't realize it until they saw both sides of the conversation, or where they misjudged a person because a translation didn't convey the intended tone and came across as rude or abrupt when that wasn't the intention. When users were able to identify errors, they did have strategies to recover and try to move forward with the conversation, but they weren't always successful. For example, people tried to maybe guess at the meaning of a message or even just ignore it altogether if they didn't understand, which could widen the gap in understanding between participants. Another common strategy was to try to write really carefully in a way that they thought that the machine would be able to translate well, but it turns out this is really hard to do consistently in a casual conversation. In summary, we found that users really don't have ways to identify and recover from machine translation errors, at least not reliably. In the paper, we discussed potential paths forward to support users in this process, like increasing the visibility of machine translation, offering repair strategies that circumvent the model entirely, or offering better guidance around system capabilities and limitations. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you'll check out the paper or watch our longer talk for more details.